Okay guys, so thanks for coming today. So yeah, this is basically a presentation talking about research and development, or as we call it, R&D, for physicists at Mars. So I'll just do a brief introduction to myself, just a bit about me, a bit about Mars as a company. I know some of you may be aware or maybe not so aware of some of the things we do. Yeah, then I'll move on to talk about science / physics at Mars, and I'll explain a bit about what that means. And then finally, just for you guys and for your awareness, I'll just touch on the sort of current opportunities we have for graduates within Mars UK. And sorry, just feel free, if there are any questions at any point, you can try and type them on Skype, and we'll get those answered at the end. So a bit about me. So I actually went to Lancaster University, and as I put here, I guess it is the dark side for lots of you guys. The positive news is I am a Yorkshireman, so I'm from Leeds, still based in Leeds. So I work at a site called Birstall, which is just on the outskirts of Leeds, near IKEA, for those that know it. I guess when I was at Lancaster I studied physics and sort of experimental physics. So I did a 4-year undergraduate master's there. My final year project, so my master's project, it was on quantum turbulence in superfluid helium-4. Please try not to ask me any questions about that anymore, because it was 5-6 years ago now, so it's fair to have forgotten a lot of that. But yeah, I graduated in 2013. I guess had some small jobs before, but nothing so relevant. My first sort of big proper job was when I joined Mars. And I've been here ever since. So I started on our R&D Graduate Programme, which I'll talk about a bit towards the end. And then yeah, outside work. So I've been married for a year now, so spending time with my wife. That's my dog Rio, you can see on the picture there. So lots of outdoors and walking. And yeah, just generally like going to the pub and outdoors. So in terms of my Mars career then, just to give you a bit of an awareness, I guess I've done quite a few different roles in Mars already. So I've been here 5 years now, and as you can see, I've sort of averaged a role every year. I guess that sounds like quite a lot, but a lot of it's because those first 3 jobs were all part of the graduate scheme. So the rotation is quite fast there. I guess the role I've been in for the last sort of 2.5 years has been on product / process development. And yeah, my specialism now is more on the process side of things, but I do still do a bit of product innovation as well. And yeah, as you can see there, as you're probably going to work out, most of my experience has been within our Petcare side of the business, but I've spent a bit of time in the chocolate segment as well. So a bit about Mars in terms of what is the business, what are our brands, and then some of our beliefs as well. So I think one of the key things about Mars, which is, I guess, in this sort of modern times a bit strange and a bit unique, is that Mars is still 100% privately owned. So it's owned by the Mars family. So there's no shareholders, no one in the, I don't hold any shares in Mars. It's purely owned by the family. And they're involved a lot at a sort of strategic level with the vision for the company going forwards. And one of the, I guess, taglines we use is, and this is across Mars, is delivering growth we're proud of. So I'll touch on our principles in a minute, but it's all around this mutual sort of win-win situation for everybody. So if you think about chocolate, it's all the way from the guys that are farming the cocoa all the way to our consumers. So it's about creating sort of fairness and equality for everyone that we sort of have transactions with. And the same applies for for suppliers and people who want to career with Mars. It's all about mutuality. So at the top level, I guess each year we do around $35 billion in sales, which yeah is quite staggering if you think about it. And we operate in more than 78 countries. It's fair to say, as you'll sort of see in a sec, that most of our business in terms of monetary value is Europe and North America, but we're in a lot of different countries. And yeah, there's 8,000 associates in the company now. I think it's probably actually nearer 90,000 by the end of this year. And the word associate is basically used for every employee in Mars as an associate. And the reason we use that language is there are some specific principles sort of behind that. So just a bit about the brands. So I guess some of the brands here you'll see are our bigger ones. So these are the $9 billion brands. So globally, these brands are worth more than $1 billion. Obviously, we've got lots of big brands across all the different segments we have, but these are our biggest. So some of the chocolate ones probably won't surprise you, probably more familiar with. For those of you who've got pets, Petcare and Whiskers, I guess, are the probably most recognised brands we have in pet care. Both $1 billion brands. We also have a brand called Royal Canin as well. So this was a separate business that we acquired a number of years ago now, but fully part of the Mars company. Also have Orbit, or Extra as it's called in the UK, used kind of interchangeably across the globe. And then one of the, I guess, newer, more exciting ones actually is that we now own a huge chain of vet practices in the US called Banfield. So that is actually one of our $1 billion brands as well. So sort of touched on this already, but I guess in terms of what you'll find with Mars globally is that, I'd say, a lot of the money, I guess, is from North America and Western Europe. So there's a lot of activity and a lot of presence in these regions, but it's fair to say that we do have distribution in a lot of different regions and pretty much every region on the globe. And a lot of these regions, so Latin America as an example, whilst at the minute the monetary value is quite small, I guess, in comparison, a lot of these regions are rapidly growing. So the growth we see in Latin America is much bigger than we see in Western Europe or North America, because they're pretty established markets. So one thing I sort of touched on before was our 5 principles. Now, these are basically guiding principles, and we sort of call it the compass for how we do business. So they're quality, responsibility, mutuality, efficiency, and freedom. So I'm just looking now. Every room in Mars has these principles on the wall. Every meeting room, you see them around the office, and actually, it's something we talk about on a daily basis. So it's not just one of those things that you stick on a wall and it looks good. This is something we genuinely use to help make decisions. Obviously, I work in R&D, so one of the big principles for us is quality, and that's everything from the quality of the finished products, but also the quality of the things we're delivering as associates as well. But yeah, everyone interacts with these principles, and they do help drive the right decisions. And personally, it's something I'm quite proud that we have, because we do live by them. So one of the principles just mentioned was freedom. So I just thought it'd be nice to touch on this. So one of the great things about being a privately owned company is that we don't have stakeholders to sort of answer to. So basically, all the cash and earnings we have, we can take a bit of a longer term view. So the family are fantastic in this, and they continue this tradition of really investing in the long term. And one of the big things we're doing at the minute, and we've been doing for a number of years, but there's a real intent now, is sustainable in a generation. So I guess what this is alluding to is that for your current generation, that in our sort of lifetime, we want everything we do from an operational perspective in Mars to be sustainable. So there's some of the more obvious ones, like energy use in the factories, but even down to how we recycle things in canteens. It's across the entire Mars network, both the sort of more obvious production, but then some of the smaller things as well. So we've already made a lot of inroads in there. So one of the good examples in the UK actually is we've just invested in a wind farm in Scotland, and basically this wind farm now is enough to offset our entire UK operation in terms of energy use. So it's something that's fantastic, and we're beginning to do this in a lot of regions. So we have a similar one in North America, and we'll continue to invest in things like this. Just some other examples as well that are a bit different. So one of the things we now have in China actually is a global food safety centre. And I guess this works a bit like our Waltham pet facility, in that it's not part of the day-to-day business. It doesn't fit into our brands or our, I guess, generating cash. It's more about building knowledge and understanding. So there's lots of work with external parties. There's lots of work on education, and it's really sort of reinvesting some of the money we make back into sort of into good practices for the whole industry in terms of food production. And there we do a lot of work with universities and other institutions. And some of the, we do lots of other things as well. So one of the cool things it sort of says here on the right is we do a lot of sequencing of the food supply chain. Now, a good thing, or the best example of this, is we sequence the cocoa genome. So it's more at a fundamental science level, and the information and data that we have that comes out of that, it helps with a lot of things. So particularly for the farmers in terms of yielding the best cocoa crops. It's things like that, and we're putting that knowledge back into the sort of public domain. So another good thing is, so I've talked about associates, and one of the great things about Mars is a real focus on being a good place to work. Obviously, you spend a lot of time at work, it's fair to say. So one of the big focuses on associate engagement and all the things that means. And this is basically just to showcase some of the great awards we've had over the last few years. So in most of our regions, we feature in sort of the top 10 great place to work, and there's various different surveys we participate in. But yeah, we're strongly recognised in the industry for being a great place to work. So just a bit about our business segments. So as it says here, we have Petcare, chocolate, Wrigley, food, drinks, and Symbioscience. So I'll just touch on those a little bit more. So as you can see here, which sometimes surprises people actually, is that traditionally Petcare has always been our biggest segment in terms of sales. I think a lot of people naturally assume it might be chocolate. So whilst chocolate is still significant, historically Petcare has always been the biggest part of our business. The reason I say historically is now that the Wrigley acquisition has fully happened, and it's fully integrated into the Mars business. This year, they've basically merged the chocolate and the Wrigley parts of the business together to make one confectionery segment. So that now, sort of edges as the biggest category. And then some of the other segments have a food, which is a small part of the business, but still you'll recognise a lot of the products there, and Mars drinks as well. One of the very small things we do, and it's related to some of the science we do, is a Symbioscience unit. So a lot of the work, as I mentioned before, is on cocoa and things, but we do actually, off the back of that, do sometimes create products. So an example of that is cocoa flavia. So it's using cocoa flavonoids and sort of the health benefits rather than the pure chocolate enjoyment, if you like. So a bit about Mars Petcare. So obviously I'm from Mars Petcare, and what we're all about in Petcare is delivering a better world for pets. So what that means is that we sort of recognise and understand the important role pets have in humans' lives. Everything from the health benefits in terms of mental health, physical health, companionship, all those types of things. We believe that if we're creating the right world for pets, then we also benefit as well. And that's sort of at the heart of everything we do. So over here to the right, you can see some of the brands we have. So as I mentioned, Pedigree, Royal Canin Whiskers, there's Banfields World Hospital, but then some of the other brands like Caesar, Dreamers, Sheba, you may well be familiar with if you've got pets as well. And then we do have some smaller, what we call specialty brands. So we have a range of fish care products, which is a small part of the business. We have some horse care brands as well. And yeah, increasingly these days we're looking more at services as well. So it's not just around the physical pet food or pet products. We're now looking at services like veterinary practices as well. So a little about physics in FMCG. So I guess I've not mentioned it so far. So FMCG means fast-moving consumer goods. Now I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Mars is the only company you can apply your physics and science. That's not the case. I guess what I'm trying to do is give you an insight into the types of roles you could do at Mars. But it is worth bearing in mind that there are lots of other companies out there in the industry that have very similar roles. Obviously, I'm a bit biased. I think Mars is a great company, but it's to open the eyes for sort of scientists and particularly physicists to the industry as a whole, because I guess it's not the obvious sort of choice. front of mind. So obviously, you guys are all physicists, and this talk is primarily, focusing on physics. I guess where, and as you'll see as I go forward, I'm going to talk about science a lot, because essentially what we have in Mars, and in particular the science, is that we don't necessarily have a specific job for physics or biology or whatever it is. What essentially we're looking for is very well-rounded scientists, and using some of those scientific skills that you guys have built up over the last few years, and been able to apply those in different areas. And you'll see some of the examples in terms of that as we go through. So a bit about Bristol, which is the site I work at. So there's 50 R&D associates at the minute. That number is growing all the time. So we have a global innovation centre here for cat and dog treats. Then we also have the regional and the site teams here as well. Obviously, I'm from Lancaster, but we do have some York alumni as well. So there is quite a strong presence of York graduates here already from across different degree areas. And I guess the point I was making earlier is we actually have scientists from all different sort of disciplines. So we've got chemists, physicists, biologists, the list goes on. Everything from sort of animal behaviourists, we've got an archaeologist even. So it's really about those skills and that mindset rather than the, I guess, specific knowledge. So I'll give you some examples that'll be able to help with that. So one of the common things we look at in pet treats in particular is oral care. So one of our big products is Dentastix, that if you're familiar with dog products, I'm sure you've seen before. So you can just look at, a dog chew as a dog chew. Actually, the science at Mars is much deeper than that. So you could look at this as just a tooth that needs cleaning. It's plaque and spit. Not very glamorous, I know. But then if you look down this list, you can look at it in a very different way. So one of the things we do, I guess from a physics angle, is look at materials with differential hardness, interfaces between materials, how different materials are interacting with teeth, how we sort of define material properties, and really helping with that. But also, as you see, there's lots of other areas of scientific discipline that go into this. And it's, I guess, the message I'd like you to take away is that, yes, you may use some of your physics skills and physics knowledge, but you are expected to be a well-rounded scientist. So yeah, this sort of just lists some of the other areas that we would sort of look at as part of this. So another example. So this is our Whiskers cat milk. So you could just look at that and say, yes, it's a bottle of milk with a cat picture on. But actually, you could look at it very differently. So as it says here, it's a protein stabilized in a suspension of oil, which is in water. So you're looking at colloid signs there. There's the nutritional aspects of it. There's all the enzymes that you need to look at as well. There's the microbiology to consider, because obviously the products we make generally have a shelf life of 12 months or longer, so they need to be stable. There's the chemical engineering aspects. And then I guess the ones that are close to physics in this sense are there's the material science, rheology, and the food science, and those sort of macro properties of the product, and the packaging as well, it's fair to say. One of the, I guess, a bit of a different angle. So yeah, as it says here, this isn't mould grown in the supermarket. So one of the things we work on as part of our research, and this is working with our marketing colleagues as well, is around eye tracking. So this is quite a good example in that it's not the most obvious scientific application, but actually the things we do in terms of eye tracking and where consumers are looking on a shelf and how they navigate a shelf to find products, and all the statistics and technology that go behind that. Actually, when you package it all together, there's a lot of science and knowledge that goes behind that. And it's fair to say, as with those examples and obviously all the other examples we have, that at Mars there is a big belief in science, and most things we do are underpinned in science in some respect. So I'm not saying that's unique to Mars, but from a Mars family perspective and where money's invested in Mars, there's a hell of a lot of money goes into science and R&D. And it's one of the sort of strong beliefs of the company as well. And the point, I guess, I was sort of touching on there is that R&D associates will have worked on all of those things, and they may have been from any of those disciplines I mentioned and more. And yeah, we always sort of say unfortunately, there's not a degree in dog biscuits or dog chews, and there's not even a degree in FMCG. So it's very difficult to, have a specific educational background, which is why we're more focused on having great scientists that can apply their skills and knowledge across the board. So as I touched before, so I've said science is woven throughout R&D. And yeah, I think a more eloquent way of putting it is that we have scientists that one day can specialize in a particular area. They can also be generalists and understand lots of things. But at the same time, you can also be choose to become an expert in an area. So we have, I guess the closest example we have here at Birstall is there's a big focus on oral care. So we have guys that are real experts in oral care. So obviously there's a few facets of science in there, but it is a particular expertise. For people like myself, the role I'm doing, I'm quite a generalist, and I focus a lot more on innovation and implementing products into factories. So the science is broader, but yeah, there are different choices you can make, and it's flexible, which is the nice thing. And yeah, as I sort of touched on as well, we've got lots of different products, lots of different brands. They move and change with markets, with consumer trends. So the science we need to use does change over time as well, which is the nice and exciting thing, because there's always something new to work on. It's not the same old stuff all the time. So in terms of partnerships as well, I've sort of touched on this before, but we have lots of partnerships with leading researchers. So I guess the links with academia are quite strong. So these are just some of the examples of universities and institutes we've worked with, either we've currently worked with them or we've worked with them in the past. And I guess one of the tips here at the bottom is that actually to be a good scientist, you don't need to be able to answer every question, but you need to know how to get the knowledge. And a lot of the time, some ways we get some of our knowledge is through these very strong partnerships we have. And it's fantastic to be able to partner up with some of these institutes to sort of widen our knowledge, of course, but also widen the knowledge around the topics as well. So I guess I was asked to talk about a day in the life of a physicist, which as I'm sure you've sort of picked up on already, is quite difficult. But I'll try and tell you what we actually do at Mars. So there's a lot of focus on continuous improvement. So if you look at our existing products and processes in factories, there's always continuous improvement. So we're trying to make things more efficient, more cost effective. We need to use different suppliers. We need to tweak the product to make the quality better. So you'll see examples of this throughout. There's also innovation to consider. So a big part of what we do is innovation, i.e. Making a current product different or improving it, all the way from that to something that's a completely new product from scratch. And there is a spectrum there, but this sort of comes from, in basic sense, of marketing have the ideas of what the customers want and what the consumers want. As R&D, it's our job to translate that into sort of technical things, and take that from an idea on a piece of paper or verbally all the way through to it being a product in the factory that we're making to send out to people. So some of the things we might do on a day-to-day basis, there might be doing background research from publications, literature, which I guess is a bit closer to the academic side of things. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, do you spend all your time in a lab with a white coat on? And I guess that's the image a lot of people have of when you say sort of scientist or research and development. It's fair to say, whilst we do have labs, that's true. The labs in inverted commas that I work in tend to be in our pilot plant facilities. So these are basically very small factories that are sort of R&D's owned areas. And in there, we're trying out new products, working out how to make things, looking at different recipes, all that type of stuff, all the way through to factories and running trials in the factories. It can also be the case that we work in the lab or the development kitchens that we have, and you're taking everything from a very small sort of concept or prototype, and you sort of ladder that through until it's at the sort of full production scale. So it's not a lab in the strictest sense, but the principles are the same in that you're designing good experiments, you're executing them, you're analysing the results and what they mean, and then you're translating that into language that everyone else can understand and communicating that out to the rest of the business. So that's the scientific side. The other side of it is also we work in a business, and whilst we are scientists, we're also part of wider cross-functional teams for projects. So there are lots of time spent in discussion and meetings around projects, giving updates, agreeing on actions, discussions. Obviously, we're all part of teams, so there's a big focus on sort of team building. So that's everything from building as a group in terms of getting to know each other and doing some sort of those almost extracurricular activities. Everything from that through to very specific functional things. So our team at the minute, for example, we're doing a lot of work on some of our processes and procedures that really help with the day-to-day job. As well as that, there's university outreach and charity volunteering. So a couple of days of year we generally do some charity volunteering, and there's good opportunities to do things like I'm doing today and talking to universities, colleges and schools. And then it's fair to say if you work in a global or a regional team, there will be a fair amount of travel depending on the role you do. So I'm in a European role, so I do a lot of travel to primarily Germany and Hungary. But as I sort of said at the start, we're in 78 countries. A lot of the jobs could in theory take you anywhere in the world, which personally I find quite exciting. It's great to go out to different countries, meet the people you're working with, experience those countries and the facilities they have over there as well. So that's a real sort of positive that I get from my job. And yeah, I guess I've touched on some of the things that I might do, and I've tried to give a sort of broad view of R&D, but as I'm sure you've guessed, there's a broad range of different types of roles, even within R&D. Be it the segments, so it could be chocolate pet care, but even within those segments, there are obviously sub-teams that have different specialities and play a different role. So yeah, sort of touched on it already, but a typical day, as I've said, there is no typical day, but that's part of the fun for me. So obviously, I don't come into the office blank and not knowing what I'm doing, but I do know that every day is a different day, and it's a blend of all these different things. So this week, as an example, I've been running trials in the earlier part of the week. Today, I've spent a lot of time in the office discussing, analysing, doing desk work, meetings. And then next week I'm travelling to one of our sites in Europe, and it does vary that much, which is what makes it sort of fun and exciting for me as well. So thinking about careers, because I guess what I've just touched on is that with your physics degrees, you can work in R&D at Mars, and there are no hard and fast rules, as I'm sure you've picked up on in that. If you're a physicist, you have to do a particular type of role. If you're a biologist, you have to do another type of role. Actually, you can find your niche within R&D. So some of the examples here, so there's product development, process development, packaging, raw materials formulation, implementing all those things, looking at new capabilities, new technologies. So there's no strict requirement for degrees for any of these things. As a physicist myself with a physics background, I guess where I tend to find most synergy, and I think where my sort of strengths lie are in process development and implementation of that. So I spend a lot of time not necessarily defining what the products are in terms of what the product looks like and things, but taking that prototype and working out how we make that in an effective way at an industrial scale. The other brilliant thing about Mars is that you're not just limited to R&D in your career. So Mars is fantastic for retaining its talent, and there's nothing stopping you working in different functions as well. So if you spend a number of years in Mars, it's actually fairly typical to spend some time outside of R&D. So I've listed some of the other sort of types of jobs you could do here or functions, but there's a never-ending list with all the different things you can do. And again, for me, I really enjoy that. So I've spent all of my career to date in R&D. But I definitely know that at some point I would like to try a different function as well, because it's just that that different experience. It builds your skills in a different way, and ultimately, I think my home and heart will always be in R&D. But yeah, there's nothing you stop in working another function for a period of time and then coming back to R&D. or equally, you could go work in another function and decide you absolutely love it, and that's what you want to carry on doing. So it's very flexible. So just a bit about what we look for in terms of the people we have working at Mars. So some of the, I guess, the fairly common things. So at the end of the day, we're a business, and be it you working on fundamental science or working for a marketing team, we need to deliver results. And results may come in the form of delivering a project. They may come in the form of implementing something in a factory. There's lots of different examples. But we'll look for people that are action-oriented, that are motivated, they're ambitious. From experience, I know a lot of you guys will have those traits. You study in physics at York University. You're intelligent people. I know you're all very driven, ambitious. So I think there's some of the things that probably come quite naturally for you guys. Some of the other things we look for is there is a strong people focus. So everything we do at Mars is through other people. It's rare that you actually do anything on your own. You generally speaking always part of a wider team. So that people focus in terms of working in teams, building relationships, delivering things for other people is very important as well. The other thing that's very important is adapting to change. So things change as markets change, as consumers change, and we have to react to that. So constantly, almost every day we spend time, solving problems of some description. There's the more general skills of understanding risk, being flexible, and really sort of embracing that change, which is, it sounds easy in principle, but it's not always so easy, and it is the skill in itself. So yeah, above all, in R&D in particular, we've sort of said the key things are for you to be a good problem solver. So a lot of that is applying your scientific knowledge to really get to the bottom of problems and coming up with solutions, and also the creative side of things. So I think people wrongly associate people that are creative in terms of they're quite artistic. I'm not artistic whatsoever, but my creative skills very much, I can, visualize processes, work out how to do things differently. But yeah, they're the sort of two key things we talk about in R&D. So just a bit about our graduate programs in the UK. So as I mentioned, I did the R&D development program. There are other graduate programs as well. So obviously I've talked about science today and physics and R&D, but there's nothing stopping you looking at some of the other graduate schemes as well. So I'm not going to dwell on them too much, but just to make you aware of those. So just a bit more specific on the R&D grad scheme. So it's a 2-year scheme, and as you sort of saw with my experience, you do 3 jobs quite quickly. So you spend 8 months in 3 different roles, and that's across Petcare in Leeds. And then one of the placements, or 2 of the placements, sorry, my light has just gone out. Sorry about that. So yeah, 1 of the placements would be in Chocolate and 2 in Bristol, or the other way around. So generally you have a home site that you start and finish in. So for me, it was Petcare. And yeah, I obviously signed off into a permanent position in my home site. And the starting salary is 30,000 with a 2K joining bonus. So that's to help with relocation expenses. So obviously you're moving your location a few times on that grad scheme as well. So these are just 2 examples of the different types of roles we might be doing. So Roz and George are our current sort of first-year graduates. So Roz is working in my team on European projects. There's a much sort of short-term view on projects, and things happen a lot quicker. And specifically, she's focusing on raw materials and formulation or recipes. On the flip side, George is working in the global innovation team. So he's looking at global projects, looking at technologies. It's longer term in scope. And I guess the complexity of innovation those guys do is bigger. But yeah, and obviously that does take a longer time. The idea and what this strand demonstrates is you can do 2 very different roles, even on the same site, so you get to experience different things quite quickly, which is fantastic because you can work out, even within R&D, where your strengths lie, what you enjoy, what you're passionate about, and that can help you shape your long-term career as well. Final thing to consider in terms of careers. So you'll probably hear as you go through university, there's lots of different graduate schemes at lots of different companies. The other thing I would urge you to consider is that graduate schemes are not the be-all and end-all. So you can get what we call a direct entry role, i.e. you don't join Mars on a graduate scheme, but you just join and sign up for a role in R&D or another function. And just because you're a graduate doesn't mean you have to go on a graduate scheme. You can just come direct into a fixed role. And a lot of the guys that apply for grad schemes are sometimes offered those roles as well. And yeah, there's nothing, there's no difference in terms of things you can achieve by doing either or. There's pros and cons to doing both. So I will stop there. So I've probably talked for long enough. But yeah, really happy to answer any questions you guys have got. So it'd be a question on Mars, question R&D, anything you'd like to ask me. I don't mind answering, things about my personal experiences and things. So I'll just go back over to Skype now. And if you guys want to type any questions, then I can certainly answer those. But yeah, thanks for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.